Paper Towers. Olivia Reed stared at the foreclosure notice, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. 3 years out of architecture school, and this was what she had to show for it. A portfolio of unrealized designs. $87,000 in student loans. And now her grandmother's medical bills piling up like autumn leaves outside the small cottage they shared. You could always sell your designs, her grandmother Dottie suggested from her armchair. Oxygen tank humming quietly beside her. At 78, her body was failing, but her mind remained sharp as ever. To whom, Gran? In this economy? Olivia folded the notice carefully, as if proper creases might somehow make its contents less devastating. Small firms aren't hiring, and the big ones want experience I don't have. The truth hung between them. Without immediate income, they'd lose everything within months. That evening, scrolling through job listings, Olivia paused at an unexpected opportunity. Executive assistant to CEO Blackwood Enterprises, immediate start. The salary made her eyes widen. It was nearly triple what she'd make as an entry-level architect, Blackwood Enterprises. Even architecture students knew the name. Julian Blackwood had transformed his father's modest construction company into a global force in sustainable urban development. His buildings reshaped skylines across continents. His reputation, however, wasn't built on kindness. Former employees described him as brilliant but merciless, demanding nothing short of perfection. It's temporary, Olivia muttered, submitting her application. Just until Gran's better. 3 days later, she stood in Blackwood Tower's imposing lobby, clutching her portfolio case out of habit rather than necessity. The receptionist directed her to the 52nd floor with a pitying smile that made Olivia's stomach tighten when the elevator doors opened. She found herself in a minimalist space of concrete, steel, and glass. A slender woman with a severe bob regarded her coolly. Olivia read, "I'm Vanessa Park, HR Director. Mr. Blackwood's previous assistant resigned yesterday. The position needs filling immediately. Was there something wrong with the job?" Olivia ventured. Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Blackwood expects excellence. Not everyone is capable of providing it." The interview was proceeding smoothly until Vanessa mentioned Blackwood's architectural background. Excitement momentarily overriding her nerves, Olivia reached for her portfolio. "I actually studied architecture too." The case slipped from her grasp, knocking over Vanessa's coffee cup. Brown liquid cascaded across the glass desk, seeping into a stack of documents. "I'm so sorry." Olivia grabbed tissues, frantically dabbing at the spreading stain. "What's happening here?" The deep voice froze her in place. Slowly, she turned to face the doorway. Julian Blackwood wasn't what she expected. Instead of an aging tycoon, she found herself looking at a man perhaps in his late 30s, with dark hair silvering at the temples and piercing gray eyes currently narrowed in disapproval. "Mr. Blackwood." "This is Olivia Reed, interviewing for the assistant position," Vanessa explained, subtly moving away from the disaster zone. "And she's redecorating my office already?" His voice was quiet but cutting. Olivia straightened her spine. "It was an accident, Mr. Blackwood. I apologize." "Those were contract revisions for the Singapore project," he noted, approaching the desk to examine the damage. 3 weeks of negotiations ruined. Something about his dismissive tone sparked defiance in Olivia. "Digital copies exist, I assume?" "Nothing is truly ruined unless you failed to back up your work." The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa looked horrified. To everyone's surprise, Julian's mouth twitched. "Miss Park, please show Ms. Reed to her desk." "She starts immediately." But sir, anyone who can spill coffee on $1 million deal and then lecture me about digital backups has exactly the spine this position requires." He turned to leave, then paused. "First task, Ms. Reed, recreate those ruined documents by noon. I imagine you'll be motivated to replace what you've destroyed." After he departed, Vanessa handed Olivia a keycard. "Congratulations," she said with obvious skepticism. "You've just become assistant to the most demanding man in Manhattan. Most people don't last a month." Olivia pocketed the card, her momentary triumph fading as reality set in. She'd secured the job, but at what cost to her sanity? I don't need to last forever, she replied quietly. Just long enough? Asterisk glass walls by her third week at Blackwood Enterprises, Olivia had established a precarious routine. She arrived at 6:30 am 30 minutes before Julian to prepare his schedule, review overnight emails from international partners, and place a single black coffee on his desk. No sugar, no cream, bitter as his morning temperament. The early mornings weren't what drained her. It was the unpredictability of Julian's demands, last-minute flights to project sites, midnight calls when inspiration struck him, and the expectation that she'd anticipate his needs before he articulated them. "You're still here," he remarked one evening. Finding her at her desk at 9:38 p.m., he'd just emerged from a video conference with investors in Dubai, his tie loosened. The only concession to the late hour. "The Portland proposal needs revision before tomorrow's meeting," Olivia replied, rubbing her tired eyes. The sustainability metrics weren't aligning with local regulations. Julian approached, studying the spreadsheets on her screen. "That's not your responsibility." "Someone had to catch it," she said simply. "The team overlooked the recent code changes?" He frowned. "You studied architecture?" "Yes," she didn't elaborate. "Yet you're proofreading regulatory compliance documents at 10 o'clock at night." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "I need this job, Mr. Blackwood." Something shifted in his expression, not quite softening, but a momentary crack in his composed facade. Without another word, he returned to his office. The next morning, Olivia found a folder on her desk labeled Read Review. Inside were preliminary designs for a community center in Brooklyn. A note in Julian's precise handwriting read, "Your architectural perspective. Tomorrow, 8 a.m." She spent that night poring over the plans, making careful annotations and suggesting modifications. This was her element, the reason she'd endured years of studio critiques and technical classes. When she finally looked at the clock, it was 3 a.m. 4 hours later. She placed the folder on Julian's desk alongside his coffee, eyes burning from exhaustion. "You look terrible," he commented when he arrived. "Thank you for the opportunity," she replied dryly. His lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Let's see if it was warranted." For the next hour, he dissected her suggestions, challenging each one with surgical precision. To her surprise, he didn't dismiss her ideas outright, he tested them. Pushed against them, forced her to defend her reasoning. "You favor function over form," he noted. "Finally, beautiful buildings that don't serve their communities are just expensive sculptures," she countered. Julian leaned back in his chair. "Who are you, Olivia Reed?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Your resume says Pratt Institute, graduated with honors. No connections, no prestigious internships. Yet you understand spatial flow better than architects I've employed for decades?" He tapped the folder. "Why are you answering my phones instead of designing buildings?" The directness of his question cracked something in her carefully maintained professionalism. "Because dreams don't pay medical bills, Mr. Blackwood." Later that week, a courier delivered a package to Olivia's apartment. Inside was a collector's edition of Le Corbusier's essays, with another note: "Talent shouldn't be wasted on scheduling meetings." JB, she didn't mention the gift when she arrived at work the next day, and neither did Julian. But something had changed between them, a tentative acknowledgement of seeing beyond surfaces. The following Tuesday, Julian's calendar showed an unusual 2-hour block labeled only St. Vincent's. "What's at St. Vincent's?" Olivia asked Vanessa during their weekly coordination meeting. Vanessa's expression tightened. "That's not something we discuss." Curious, Olivia searched for St. Vincent's and discovered it was a children's hospital in Queens. When Julian left that afternoon, she impulsively followed him, maintaining a discreet distance. At the hospital, she watched from the corridor as Julian sat beside beds of young patients, listening intently as they described their dream homes. He sketched their fantastical ideas: treehouses with helipads, underwater castles, homes with roller coasters, treating each childish concept with genuine consideration. "How long have you been standing there?" Julian asked without turning as she lingered in the doorway after his final visit. Long enough, Olivia admitted. They walked silently to the parking lot, the evening air heavy with unspoken questions. My younger brother died here when we were children, Julian finally said, looking not at her but at the illuminated hospital windows. Leukemia. He was 9 and obsessed with building the perfect treehouse. Understanding bloomed. So you built real houses instead? I build what I can. It never feels like enough. The admission seemed to surprise even him. This doesn't appear in press releases, Ms. Reed. I assumed as much. In the dim glow of streetlights, Julian appeared different, not the untouchable CEO, but a man haunted by an old loss. Is that why you need this job? Someone you care about is ill? My grandmother raised me after my parents died. Now she needs specialized care I can't afford on an architect's starting salary. Olivia hesitated. Her house, our home, is facing foreclosure. Julian nodded once, absorbing this information with the same intensity he gave to architectural plans. I'll have my driver take you home. That's not necessary. It's late, and you shouldn't have followed me here. His tone was firm but lacked its usual edge. Tomorrow, we'll discuss your involvement with the Brooklyn Community Center. Your insights might prove valuable. As the luxury car pulled away from the hospital, Olivia realized that Julian Blackwood wasn't merely the cold, demanding employer she'd assumed. Behind his glass walls of perfect control lived someone who understood loss, intimately, perhaps even better than she did. The realization was both comforting and unsettling. For the first time since taking the position, Olivia wondered if there might be more to this job than simply earning a paycheck. Foundation lines the Brooklyn Community Center became their shared project, officially Julian's vision, but increasingly shaped by Olivia's practical suggestions. Twice weekly they met after hours, spreading blueprints across the conference table as the Blackwood Tower emptied around them. The gymnasium ceiling needs to be higher, Olivia insisted one evening, sketching a quick modification. This neighborhood has produced 3 NBA players in the last decade. These kids dream big, literally. Julian studied her drawing. Higher ceilings mean structural reinforcements, which means additional costs, I know. She met his gaze without flinching. But some investments pay off in ways spreadsheets can't measure. To her surprise, he nodded. Make the adjustments. And add skylights. Natural light reduces energy consumption. As weeks passed, their professional relationship evolved into something neither could easily define. Olivia remained his assistant, managing his relentless schedule and corporate demands, but Julian increasingly sought her architectural perspective. He began introducing her at meetings not as his assistant, but as a design consultant. Vanessa noticed the change. Be careful, she warned Olivia in the break room. Julian doesn't get close to employees. We're working on a project together, Olivia replied neutrally. That's what his last assistant thought too. Vanessa's voice lowered. Boundaries blur easily in this building. The warning lingered as Olivia drove Julian to the Brooklyn site one Saturday morning. They walked the empty lot together, visualizing walls and windows where only dirt and construction markers existed. My brother would have loved this space, Julian said unexpectedly, gazing at the neighboring basketball court where teenagers played despite the early hour. Tell me about him. Olivia ventured. Julian was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Thomas drew buildings, constantly fantastical structures that defied physics. Our father called it a waste of time? His expression darkened. After Thomas died, Father built a hospital wing with his name on it, as if that could compensate for the years of dismissing his dreams. And you? Olivia asked softly. I've built my company to create what Thomas imagined, spaces that inspire. But somewhere along the way, he didn't finish the thought. You became your father, she completed quietly. Julian's sharp glance held no anger, only recognition. Perhaps that's why you unsettle me, Olivia. You see too clearly. The moment stretched between them, fragile and significant. Then Julian's phone rang, a Tokyo investor with urgent concerns, and the spell broke. That evening, Olivia found a small model of the community center on her desk, meticulously crafted with her suggested modifications. No note accompanied it. But none was needed. Asterisk structural collapse. The community center groundbreaking was scheduled for early December, with press and local officials attending. Olivia spent weeks coordinating details while continuing her regular duties. Her grandmother's condition had stabilized with proper care, but the financial strain remained crushing. 2 days before the ceremony, Julian called Olivia into his office where Richard Hargrove, the company's CFO, waited with a grave expression. "There's been a significant discrepancy discovered in the Brooklyn project budget," Julian stated without preamble. Richard slid a folder across the desk. "Nearly $800,000 has been allocated to non-existent contractors. The paper trail leads to authorizations bearing your digital signature." The accusation hit Olivia like physical blow. "That's impossible. I never—" "The evidence suggests otherwise," Richard interrupted. "Your access codes were used, Ms. Reed." Julian's face remained impassive. "Given your financial difficulties, the implication is concerning. You think I stole from the project?" Olivia's voice cracked with disbelief. "After everything we've built together?" "I need to understand what happened," Julian replied, his tone professionally detached. "Until this investigation concludes, you're suspended." Security escorted her from the building, employees watching as she carried her few personal items in a cardboard box. The humiliation burned worse than the injustice. At home, Olivia examined copies of the documents Richard had shown her. The authorizations indeed carried her digital signature, but the contractors were companies she'd never heard of, much less approved. A text message arrived from an unfamiliar number. "Check the bid history on Northeast Supplies. You weren't the target." The message led her down a rabbit hole of research. Northeast Supplies had consistently underbid competitors on Blackwood projects for years, securing contracts worth millions. The company was registered to a shell corporation that Olivia eventually traced to none other than Richard Hargrove. The CFO had been embezzling for years through fraudulent contracts. The community center was merely his latest vehicle and Olivia his convenient scapegoat. At dawn, she drove to Julian's penthouse, persuading the doorman to call up with claims of urgent business documents. When Julian appeared in the lobby, his expression hardened at the sight of her. "You need to see this," she said. Thrusting her research into his hands, for 30 tense minutes he reviewed her findings in silence. Finally he looked up. "Why would Richard frame you specifically?" "Because I was the only one looking closely at the community center budget," she realized aloud. "I questioned several of his contractor recommendations. He needed to discredit me." Julian's jaw tightened. "Come with me." They drove to Blackwood Tower in silence. Richard was already in Julian's office for an early meeting, visibly alarmed when Olivia entered behind Julian. What followed was a methodical dismantling of Richard's scheme. Julian had already verified Olivia's findings and contacted forensic accountants. With each damning piece of evidence presented, Richard's composure deteriorated. "You trust her over me?" Richard finally exploded. "I've been with this company 15 years while she has more integrity in one design sketch than you've shown in your entire career," Julian finished coldly after security removed Richard. Julian turned to Olivia. "I should have questioned the accusations more thoroughly." "Yes, you should have," she agreed, hurt still evident in her voice. "Your position remains open." Olivia shook her head slowly. "I can't return as though nothing happened." "You didn't trust me, Julian. Then what do you want?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities neither had acknowledged. Redesigned blueprints. The Brooklyn Community Center opened 6 months later to neighborhood celebration. Olivia stood at the back of the crowd during the ribbon cutting, watching as Julian delivered a speech about creating spaces that nurture potential. They hadn't spoken since her resignation. She'd used her severance package to start a small architectural consulting firm, specializing in community-focused projects. Julian had sent a brief note of congratulations when he learned of her venture, but nothing more after the ceremony. She wandered through the completed building, her ideas now tangible in soaring ceilings. Abundant natural light and flexible spaces designed for multiple uses. It was everything she'd imagined and more. "What do you think?" Julian's voice came from behind her. Olivia turned, surprised by how her heart quickened at the sight of him. It's beautiful. Thomas would have approved. Yes, his eyes held hers. I've missed your perspective. Professional or personal? The question slipped out before she could reconsider. Both. Julian gestured to a nearby bench. When they were seated, he continued, I've been reflecting on why I reacted as I did to Richard's accusations. And? I was afraid, he admitted quietly. Not that you had betrayed the company, but that you had betrayed me. It was unexpectedly personal. The confession hung between them, honest in a way their previous interactions had rarely been. I have something to show you, Julian said finally, handing her an envelope. Inside were architectural plans for a rehabilitation center adjacent to her grandmother's nursing facility. The design incorporated elements reminiscent of her own style. What is this? Olivia asked, though she already suspected. Your next project, if you're interested. Blackwood Enterprises would like to contract Reed Architectural Design as lead consultants. Why? Julian's expression softened. Because you were right about everything, the community center, Richard's scheme, and most importantly, what I was becoming. I don't want to be my father, Olivia. She studied him, seeing not the intimidating CEO who had hired her, but the man who sketched dream houses for sick children and remembered his brother's unfulfilled potential. I can't work for you again, she said carefully. Disappointment flickered across his face. I understand, but I could work with you. Olivia held up the plans. As equals, professional boundaries clearly defined, and personal ones? Julian asked quietly. She smiled slightly. Those might require further negotiation. 3 months later, the rehabilitation center broke ground. Olivia's firm handled the design while Blackwood provided resources and construction expertise. Their professional collaboration flourished, built on mutual respect and shared vision. The personal boundaries proved more fluid. Coffee meetings to discuss projects extended into dinners where architecture rarely dominated conversation. Julian met Dottie, charming the older woman with stories of his own grandmother's stubbornness. Olivia discovered his private passion for jazz and his terrible cooking skills. On the evening, the rehabilitation center's foundation was poured. They stood together watching the concrete trucks depart. Foundations matter, Julian observed. They determine what can be built and how high it can reach. They also determine if what's built will last, Olivia added. Acutely aware of his presence beside her, Julian turned to face her. I've spent my career building structures meant to outlast generations while keeping everyone at a safe distance. It's a lonely way to leave a legacy. What would you build instead? She asked. Something less monumental, perhaps, but more meaningful. His hand found hers, tentative in a way Julian Blackwood was never tentative in business. Something built by two people who see each other clearly. Olivia smiled, remembering the assistant who had once spilled coffee and challenged a billionaire. I think we have the right blueprint for that. As they walked away from the site, their fingers remained intertwined, a connection stronger than wealth or obligation, built on foundations that would endure whatever they chose to create together.